I want you to just, for a second, picture a really universal scene. You're in a crowded room. Maybe there's, that low hum of conversation, music sort of thrumming.
Right.
And you feel that pull, that ache to be seen, to feel radiant and just part of it all. But then there's the other feeling.
The counterpull.
Exactly. That instant recoil, almost terror, if someone's gaze actually lands on you. It locks you in place. We call it the spotlight effect, but it feels so much more visceral than that.
It's the essential human paradox, isn't it? We are social creatures. We crave deep connection, but we flinch from the very thing that makes it possible.
Through visibility.
And if we just write it off as, insecurity or shyness, we are really missing the point, because this isn't just psychological discomfort. It's a failure of perception.
And that's where we're headed in this deep dive. We need to look beyond that generalized fear and really understand the architecture of perception that turns being seen into such a threat.
Yes. Because visibility in the human world is never neutral. It is an active, demanding act of definition.
An act of definition.
Precisely. The moment you become the object of someone's perception, the figure in their field, you risk losing all the fluidity, the sheer multiplicity of your inner life. You become fixed.
You become one thing.
Suddenly you are one thing to them, and that one thing, it often contradicts the thousands of things you know yourself to be.
So our mission today is to unpack that mechanism. We're going to borrow some really fundamental concepts from Gestalt theory, which is, it's so much more than therapy. It's a powerful philosophy of how reality is structured.
And the core concept is, it's the simplest one. We perceive wholes. Our brain doesn't see a random collection of lines and colors. It organizes them instantly.
Into meaningful patterns.
Into meaningful patterns, yes.
Yeah.
And within any whole, there's this constant dynamic tension between the figure, that's what's currently occupying our attention, and the ground.
The ground being everything else.
The vast, fluid background from which that figure emerges.
And a great way to think about this, for you listening, is your own experience right now. Our voices, the information we're talking about, that is the figure.
Right.
But the ground is immense. It's the pressure of your body against the chair, the air on your skin, the memory of a conversation you had yesterday. All of that is present, active, but silent. It's the context.
And that context, that ground, is so vital because perception is never passive. It is an active, constant act of selection, of meaning-making, and organization. So now, apply that active selection process to the social world.
We're constantly organizing others.
And they're constantly organizing us.
Which brings us to the critical question for you, the listener. What happens when you are abruptly pulled out of that fluid background of your own life and placed under the intense light of someone else's story about you?
Your inner world is, it's a complex, layered painting, right? It's full of shadows, unfinished strokes, colors that shift with the light. But when someone perceives you,
their perception just focuses on one thing.
One single fragment that catches their eye. A success, a failure, a personality trait. And that fragment becomes your imposed figure in their story.
And that extraction has a profound, and I think often unrecognized, cost.
The loss of self-determination over your own image.
Wow. Your true self is fluid, but the figure they see is static. And if you're not careful, you start to believe that static outline is all there is, or all that's acceptable.
And you shrink your complexity to fit their simplified view. It's a kind of psychological compression.
A compression.
Which brings us to the real core of the fear. It's usually not a fear of exposure, if someone's seeing the darkness you already know is there. The real anxiety is misrecognition.
Misrecognition. That's a brilliant distinction. So it's the fear of being seen only partially, of having one part of you, say your anxiety, magnified and then called the definitive you.
And that partial vision becomes a cage.
It does.
And this fear is so deeply rooted in our social reality because society has this powerful drive toward coherence.
Things need to make sense.
Exactly. We are constantly simplifying complex realities to make them manageable. The world craves it. It craves efficiency, stable expectations. That's why we reduce people to roles. The strong one, the cheerful one, the reliable one.
But I have to push back a little on that. Don't we need some simplification to function? If every person we met demanded we see their full, complicated internal world, social interaction would just grind to a halt.
That's the tension. You're absolutely right. We need it for perceptual economy, but the problem starts when that simplification hardens, when it becomes an imposed identity.
Okay.
When the need for coherence supersedes the reality of complexity, That is what I'd call the violence of reduction. It's the denial of that vast ground.
I see that. You think of the person who early in life learned that if they show confidence, they get rewarded. But if they show hesitation or need, they're dismissed. So the figure becomes the strong, decisive one. And their doubt, their fatigue, their need for support, that all just sinks.
It sinks into the ground. And it doesn't vanish. It remains active, but it's unacknowledged. That is what we call the shadow.
So the shadow isn't some, evil part of us.
Not at all. It's simply the sum total of our unacknowledged wholeness. The parts of you that are too contradictory, too messy, or too vulnerable to fit the coherent figure you or others have assigned to you.
So decades later, this person might be wildly successful in their strong figure, but they feel hollow, that strange emptiness.
They're protecting their assigned figure so fiercely that they've sacrificed their actual self. And this leads so many of us to live in this kind of perceptual limbo, offering just enough to be accepted.
But not enough to be truly known.
Exactly, to safeguard that fragile, ever-changing internal world.
But here's the twist, right? What if the deepest anxiety isn't even about how others reduce us, but how we reduce ourselves? Do we let our own inner figures, our genuine rage, our unexpected tenderness, do we let them emerge without immediately editing them?
We curate our own private perception just as strictly as our public one. We keep parts of ourselves in shadow, not because they're dangerous to the world, but because they're dangerous to the coherence of our own story.
The story we tell ourselves about who we are.
We need to believe we are one kind of person, and the shadow holds all the evidence to the contrary.
And that shadow, that wholeness, is always waiting.
Yeah.
But bringing it into figure, that takes courage. Because once you fully see an uncomfortable truth about yourself, once you name it, you can't unsee it.
And this is where we move from a static idea of perception to something more dynamic. We need to talk about the field concept.
Okay.
Social reality isn't a set of individual points. It's a dynamic, living whole. Think of a ripple on a lake where everyone's presence shifts the tension and the form of the entire thing.
So my anxiety in a crowd isn't just my own internal problem.
Not entirely, no. It's the result of you being sensitive to the form of the field itself. The ambient tension, the lack of connection, it becomes flesh in your nervous system.
That's the principle of isomorphism, right?
Exactly. The structure of our inner experience mirrors the structure of the field we are in. If the social environment is fragmented, we feel fragmented. If the field is anxious, our body resonates with that anxiety. We're like tuning forks.
That makes perfect sense. It means we're profoundly responsive, not just reactive. And fields, you said, especially social fields, they crave closure.
They desperately crave it, yes. Unresolved figures, things like ambiguity or pain or even silence, they create discomfort. And that triggers a primal drive for completion. We want a neat, finished gestalt.
And you see that constantly. When you try to share something vulnerable, you express a raw, open-ended pain, say you're confused about your career, and someone immediately jumps in.
With advice.
With advice or platitudes. It'll be okay, just do these 3 things.
They are trying to close the gestalt. Your open-ended pain is an unstable figure in their field. They rush to smooth it over, to make it manageable, and in doing so, they erase the very complexity you were trying to hold.
The message is, make this discomfort stop.
It is.
So the lesson we learned so quickly is that full expression leads to erasure. So we start editing ourselves. We only offer what can be easily completed, creating a figure that won't disturb the field.
But the personal cost of that is huge. It creates an unfinished gestalt, an open loop in your own psyche. This is why you might obsess over a conversation, replaying it again and again.
Because something essential was left unsaid.
Your psyche is demanding wholeness. It's demanding resolution.
And this is where we have to talk about attention sovereignty. Because when your sense of self relies on external attention to determine what parts of you are real, what parts are figure, you give up your authorship.
You surrender the right to dictate where your own awareness rests. You begin living inside other people's fields, prioritizing their narrative needs over your own inherent complexity. Your fear of being seen is ultimately the fear of having your attention hijacked.
And your figure fixed by someone else. So we've laid out this dread of being fixed, of being reduced. But let's take that philosophical leap you mentioned. What if the deepest fear isn't just misrecognition, but the sheer terror of realizing that there's no solid, fixed self to be recognized at all?
That's the existential vertigo. We spend so much energy defending this idea of a permanent core self. But Gestalt philosophy suggests something different, that the self is not a noun, it's a verb.
A process.
A dynamic process, a rhythm, a pattern shaped moment by moment by the environment and the contact you make within it.
But clinging to that idea of a core self, it feels like a necessary anchor, a necessary illusion maybe, just to get through the day.
Wow.
But if there is no single static truth to capture, then being seen correctly is impossible.
It is, and that relieves the pressure, doesn't it? You are dramatically different with your partner than with your tax accountant, not because you're inauthentic, but because you are profoundly responsive to the field.
You are what emerges in the contact.
Yes. The goal of visibility isn't to confirm some fixed internal truth. It's to participate in the dynamic truth of the moment.
That's the real paradox of freedom, then. The desire to be seen as you really are assumes you stopped growing yesterday. So true visibility comes when you stop trying to control how you're perceived.
And instead, allow whatever figure needs to arise in that encounter to do so, even if it contradicts the figure you presented 5 minutes ago.
And that's a quiet revolution because it happens both ways. When you stop controlling how you are seen, you also stop controlling how you see others.
Judgment softens. Curiosity awakens. You start to see them not as fixed objects, the difficult client, but as dynamic fields, constantly forming and reforming.
So the ultimate reward of this vulnerability, this surrender, is transformation. It's allowing another person to see a part of you that maybe you haven't even seen in yourself yet.
Yes, to let their gaze, if it's clear and accepting, reflect back a figure you didn't even know was forming in your own ground.
To be witnessed like that.
It reshapes the entire field, internal and external. It completes those unfinished gestalts that have been draining your energy for years. But it demands surrender, because perception isn't passive viewing, it's creative participation. You don't just feel understood differently. You become different in the light of true contact.
So wholeness, then, is the integration of figure and ground. The self is not a stable object to be seen, but a continuous happening. A figure that rises, serves its purpose, and then just dissolves back into the background.
Making space for the next.
The self is never finished, and that is exactly what makes it alive.
So we started with this fear of being fixed and reduced, and we end here, realizing that wholeness is about embracing that complexity, that inconsistency, and giving ourselves permission to be an unfinished gestalt.
True visibility, then, isn't about exposure to others. It's really about ceasing to look away from yourself.
Not the curated self.
No, the raw, unfiltered field of your own awareness. And when you can stand in that field without needing to immediately edit it or get it validated, that conflict between the seer and the seen it dissolves. You're no longer managing the figure.
So if the self is a ripple that rises and dissolves, making space for the next, what remains when the figure vanishes? Is the answer to wholeness found in that intense focus on the figure? Or is it in the quiet hum of the ground that holds everything? Seen and unseen, past and future, without any distinction.
That's the final question to sit with.
Don't just accept the figure. Look again, pay attention to the ground that holds your own awareness. That's where the quietest power resides.